In this video we're going to look at an A to Z of passing your driving test. Let's start with A. A is for appeal. If you're not happy with the result of your driving test or you're dissatisfied in relation to how it was conducted, you could make an appeal to your local district court. If the district court feels you've been hard done by, they may issue an order that will make sure you have your test redone at no extra charge, but they cannot overturn the original test result. B is for blind spot. It's so important that you check your blind spot, which is over your right shoulder if you're parked on the left. It's so important you check this before you move off. I've made lots of videos on this and I've touched on it lots over the years on this YouTube channel, so I'll leave some links in the description that covers the blind spot. C is changing lane. This could be one of the most important and potentially challenging things you do on your driving test. If you are changing lanes, make sure you indicate in good time and get lots of mirror checks. Don't forget to double check your mirrors just before you enter the new lane. It's so important to get the extra mirror checks if changing lanes. D is for dazzled. And this is in relation to a question you could be asked in your theory test just before the practical driving test. If you're dazzled by the lights of oncoming cars at night, what should you do? The answer is don't look directly at the lights, just look to the left verge of the road and if necessary, slow down and stop. Since we're on the topic of dazzling road users, make sure you don't use your full headlights in well-lit areas or when meeting or following other drivers. E is next. E stands for eyes and ears. If you believe in God, then you'll believe that God gave you two of each. So try use them to the best of your ability on your driving test. Eyes, plan ahead, think ahead, try your best to read the road ahead and don't be overly concerned about what's behind you. It's far more important to be aware of what could happen in the future as you're driving. So try and predict the road ahead and predict things so you can manage them before it's too late, basically. Ears. So it's okay. In fact, it's not just okay. It's a good idea to let down your window a little bit if you're finding it hard to see at a blind or a closed junction. So don't be afraid. Let down your window a little bit and you might be able to hear traffic then in the distance coming up. Next is F. F is for funeral. In the unlikely event that you come across a funeral in your driving lesson or your driving test, here's my advice on what to do. Firstly, slow down and prepare to stop. Watch out for the funeral director who will probably be leading the procession. He or she is most likely going to be dressed in black and they may be carrying a stick of some sort. They could be carrying a little torch at night as well. You must obey the funeral director as sometimes they may request you to stop or they might ask you to pull in if it's a narrow road. This is for traffic control purposes. You should stop until the hearse and the procession has cleared and only then should you move away. G is for graduated driver licensing and that's the system that currently operates now. It means that even when you pass your driving test you will still have some restrictions to work with, so you will have to have end plates for a period of 2 years after you pass. These must be displayed at the front and rear of your vehicle. They mean that you will have a lower threshold of penalty points and a much lower threshold of drink driving limitations. You can still drive on motorways with the end plates, but you cannot act as an accompanying driver for other learner drivers. Next is H. H is for horn. And while it's extremely unlikely that you'll be using your horn in the driving test, it could be a question you could be asked in the theory part before you actually do the practical part. So the restrictions on the use of the horn are as follows. You are not allowed to use the horn between the hours of 11:30 at night and 7 in the morning unless it's an emergency. Moving on then, I is for indicators. You must indicate in good time to let other road users know what your intentions are, whether it's moving off, parking, turning left or right, changing lanes, whatever you happen to be doing. One fault that I notice often creeps up is that learner drivers often accidentally let their indicators switch off before they've properly parked. So they're all set to park. They could park very well on the side of the road, but what they don't realise is the wheel has kind of straightened up and therefore knocked the indicator off. So just keep an eye on that one. You don't want to let your indicators go off too prematurely. J is for jumps and jerks. If you want to have a nice smooth journey on your driving test, then try not to lift your clutch up too quick or in too hasty a manner, because this can lead to jumps and jerks, and it can lead to a very uneven and uncomfortable feeling. So keep it smooth by being extremely careful with your clutch and don't lift it too quick. Next is K. K is for curb. Try not to worry too much if you hit the curb. If you hit the curb, it does not mean you failed the test, whether you're doing a turnabout, a reverse, or parking, or whatever you're doing. The most important thing is to try and rectify the mistake and don't dwell on it. So for example, if you do hit the curb on your turnabout, it's not a big deal. As long as you don't hit it at speed and as long as you don't mount the curb excessively, it really shouldn't be that big a deal. It's not likely to fail you. But in these cases, your reaction is more important than the initial mistake. So just dust yourself off, forget that it happened, and just move on with the test. L is for learner permit, and it's also for L plates. If you're going to be doing a driving test, make sure you have your learner permit with you, and the tester will have a look at that before he goes out and does the test with you. So the tester is going to look at that to make sure that it's valid and up to date. You must also have L plates clearly displayed at the front and back of your car. M is for mirrors. A crucial part of being a good driver is using your mirrors properly. So make sure that you check your mirrors when overtaking, changing lanes, turning, moving off, and there's lots more areas as well where you should check your mirrors. I have a great video on that, so I'll leave a link in the description and you can check that video out if you wish. N is for no entry, and this is what the sign looks like. So be aware of this sign. You could be asked this in your theory part before the actual driving test. O is for observation. So observation is different to mirrors in that observation is generally about moving the head, whereas mirrors is more so about moving the eyes. So observation comes in at junctions and roundabouts and moving off. So if you're at a junction, keep the head moving left and right, especially on right turns because you're crossing two lanes. At roundabouts, try and preview the roundabout as best you can and don't stare the one way too long at junctions or roundabouts. Again, I have a video on this that goes into much more detail. Links will be in the description. P is next. So P is for progress. Whatever you do, don't drive too slow in your driving test. If it's safe to go, if it's safe to pull out, just do it. If it's safe to reach the speed limit, do that as well, especially if it's a good, safe, straight, clear road with little or no parked cars. The tester does not want you to be too cautious. The tester wants you to be normal and confident. Q is for quiet. It's going to be very quiet while your driving test is being conducted. So I would advise you that when you're practicing with your sponsor or whoever's with you, that you ask that person to be very, very quiet, turn off the radio, and get used to driving in an atmosphere of silence. This should help bridge the gap then between the practice and the tests, and it may help you prepare better for your actual driving test. R is next. R is for reverse around the corner. Now there's so much I could say about this. It causes a lot of anxiety and I've made lots of videos on this. I'll leave a link in the description for this as well, of course. But I will say three things briefly. Firstly, take it slow on the reverse around the corner. Use your clutch control. Don't rush it. Secondly, don't spend too long looking in your mirrors. This is probably the most common mistake. If you're reversing around the corner for your test, make sure that you're very aware of what's going on behind you by looking over your shoulders. And the third one then, don't oversteer at the end. I find a lot of people get a little bit excited with the wheel and they start turning it hastily left and right. Sometimes the less you steer the better. It can be better just to give the car time to react. Okay, so that's R for reverse. S is for stop signs. It's so important that you stop completely at a stop sign. I find a lot of people, they actually don't stop properly at stop signs and the response is, well, there was nothing coming, there was no one there. But regardless of what's there, You must stop completely at a stop sign and then do your observation, and then you can go. Even if you're just stopping briefly, at least make sure you stop completely. T is next. T is for tax. Make sure that your car is properly taxed before you turn up for a driving test. The same goes for insurance and NCT. If your car is not properly taxed, there will be no driving test. U is for under the bonnet. You will be asked to point out some parts of the engine under the bonnet before you start driving, basically. So as part of your driving test, they won't go into too much detail, but make sure you're very much aware of the parts of the engine, from the engine oil to the dipstick to the brake fluid and things like that. V is next. V is for vehicle controls. It is so important. Like I was saying about the under the bonnet checks, it's so important that you're aware of all your vehicle controls. So make sure that you are very, very familiar with your wipers and how they work, your lights, hazard lights, demisters. You will be asked these, so it's always good to know how the vehicle controls in your car work, because you will be asked to demonstrate some of these. W is for wash. It's a good idea to wash your car before you turn up for your driving test, if you're using your own car, that is, of course. It's not going to be a deal breaker, but it always looks good if you turn up in a nice clean car. W is also for windows, so make sure your windows are nice and clear and there's no dirt or grime on it that's going to affect your observation. X is for X's. These days the testers use tablets, so they're not marking X's on a sheet, but the same principle applies. If you get too many X's under the one area, you're going to fail. So let's look at the marks. You've got grade 1 marks, grade 2s and grade 3s. So grade 1s are minor, grade 2s are kind of medium marks, and grade 3s are serious. So if you get 1 X under the grade 3, it's a fail. If you get 9 or more X's under the grade 2s, that's also a fail. And although the grade 1s don't cause you to fail, they may build up and evolve into grade 2s, so obviously you don't want to get too many of those either. Y is next. Y is for yield. These are the road markings that indicate this junction is yield. So yield means you have to give way to traffic on the major road. I want to talk about blind yields as well. What I find with learner drivers a lot of the times is they're coming up to a yield junction and they notice the fact that it's yield, but they don't actually stop if it's a dangerous junction. So it's so important to identify a blind yield junction. If it's blind yield, the yield is not a license to go. The yield is instructing you to give way. If you can't see at a blind or a closed junction, then you have to stop and creep out. It's so important that you do not rush the blind yield junctions. Z is for zebra crossings. So zebra crossings look like this, and you have to be very conscious of pedestrians at or near the zebra crossings. If a pedestrian puts 1 foot on the zebra crossing, they are considered to have right of way. Now pedestrians, whether they're at zebra crossings or wherever they are, generally speaking, pedestrians, they're not the sharpest chisel in the old toolbox, so you're going to have to watch the body language of pedestrians. In Ireland, they are incredibly casual, incredibly cavalier crossing the road, much more so than in the UK or on the continent. So watch out for pedestrians. They could be walking along with their head in the phone, they might have their earphones in, and they could literally just walk out in front of you, whether it's at zebra crossings, pedestrian crossings or whatever. So be warned, pedestrians can be the biggest hazard you'll face on the road. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and up on screen you'll see some similar videos now that cover some driving test tips. Thanks a million for watching, and I'll see you soon.